while, I bet Neanderthals were like, huh, dumb Homo erectus, they got shit on us.
It was a joke. You're taking it way further than I wanted to.
Oh no, I'm 100% serious. You will all die.
Alright.
No, I don't fucking care.
What?
I made a joke about Mac people being sheeple, and then he went off on like, oh, PC Master Race people are sheeple too. Like, you just conform to a different thing. And I was like, okay. Everybody's a sheeple. That's what we're going to be talking about, because welcome to the Common Geeking Program, a book club podcast where each week 3 of us read up on a topic and then discuss it from geeky, nerdy perspective.
You hear that, sheeple?
This week,
ready for that, you little sheep?
This week, I am your host.
Of your soul.
You done?
Your woolly soul. Well, are we done?
I don't know. I need to finish this intro read, so
I mean,
can we be done?
I guess, if you want to.
Cool.
Oh, all right.
This week, I'm your host, Pat, and we will be discussing Exit Through the Gift Shop, a documentary that's sort of supposed to be about street art and Banksy, and then turned into something completely different and a little bit terrible. I am joined by 2 people, each of whom has selected a domain that they think connects to this topic. They are...
Hey guys, it's me, Keenan. I will be repping Best in Show, which is a 2000 mockumentary film about a dog show.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan. I'm here talking from my jail cell, and my domain this week is going to be about S-Town.
S-Town?
It's a podcast.
So meta that they don't even know yet. Actually, they know, but we don't know.
Man,
You know?
I really wish your name started with an S, Ryan, so that way we could have just made jokes about how you were just like a documentary about yourself. S-Town.
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 Population Ryan.
S-Town.
Yeah.
We're going to be starting by summarizing our topic, and then moving on to the domains before we openly discuss. Finally, we will close with a competitive rating section in which I will determine which one of you best contributed to the discussion and whether today's topic is enjoyable. So, I guess without further ado, let's begin. Wow. That's very hard to say very fast. Exit Through the Gift Shop is a documentary that kind of follows the birth of the street art movement at the beginning, showing several notable street artists, such as Space Invader, whose modus operandi was to make mosaic versions of characters from the popular Space Invader game and just leave them all over the place. Using, like, I would assume some sort of construction glue to glue them to the sides of bridges, buildings, like, whatever he felt like doing. His cousin is this guy named In-Terry-Gation, who is just a French immigrant to California, who likes to videotape literally every aspect of his life. He's got thousands of tapes, chock full of footage that he never even watches, but he just likes to film. He's always got his camera. He ends up going to visit his cousin Space Invader with said camera and starts to document the journey and the process that Invader goes through. And along the way, he starts to meet more prominent figures in the street art community, starting with, what's his name? Shepard Fairey? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's Shepard's Ferry.
Yeah, Shepard Fairey, who is most known for his portrait of Barack Obama, which then became like the symbol for hope. It's the one that's got him in like the
Hope.
red, white, and blue,
Yeah.
overlay of colors. But his main like calling card was the Obey symbol, which has now become like its own brand. It's a picture of Andre the Giant, I think, right?
Yeah, it's Andre the Giant.
It's Andre the Giant super zoomed in, so all you can see is like his nose, his eyes, and his eyebrows, and then underneath, it's black and white, and then underneath in red it just says Obey.
Yeah.
So that was his like popular calling card. They would go around on rooftops.
Andre's got a posse.
Yeah. Huge murals of that. And Terry began to follow him around and document everything. He would actually be pretty into climbing up there with him and even going further up to get the right shot to document everything. And over the years, they ran into multiple other people like Neckface, and Worf was a really interesting one because like he would walk up to walls and just write something like "sorry about your wall" in spray paint and then sign it Borf. His whole deal, I guess, in my opinion, was that he was just trying to point out how fleeting life is and like how like how material things really don't have any value, and that he was just writing it off as like saying, sorry, I ruined your wall. It doesn't really matter though. Obviously, like the big draw of this documentary is when he runs into Banksy, and I think it was actually Shepard Fairey who put them together, like linked them up. Banksy was coming to town. Banksy had started his career in England, started traveling around the world, putting up different murals and things, usually anti-war, like anti-violence, anti-torture, very politically charged messages in his art. But he would spray paint them on walls and on billboards and do things like that, which kind of approaching vandalism. It was vandalism. Like there's no ifs, ands, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is vandalism, but the argument is like, even though it's vandalism, it's still art. It depends on the intentions. We'll get into that later. He meets up with Banksy and earns Banksy's trust enough that Banksy will allow him to film when he's doing things, but only his hands, and only if Banksy can review the footage afterwards.
Makes sense. He's got to keep
got
to keep his identity a secret, or otherwise his crap wouldn't sell for as much as it does.
So nobody else in the film besides, I think, Invader wanted their face blurred. Even Invader let his real voice be used, whereas Banksy was no face.
And not only blurred, he was shot with like backlighting and stuff like that, so you couldn't see anything in his face.
Well, like in the old footage, they blurred it, but in the new footage where they're actually interviewing him, they put him in a dark, like he had a hood up. You could not see anything whatsoever. He had a hat on.
Yeah, where Banksy is interviewing himself, because it's all just some Banksy mindfuck.
It's all Banksy mindfuck, man.
I want to know if Freddie Guerrera is actually an artist. Like, what if he's just an actor Banksy hired?
No, like, he's a legit insane person. If like, a fraction of that story is
true.
We'll
get in there.
I have deep reservations about the state of his mind and, like, how he handles. Like, he shouldn't have a family. He's a dangerous person.
He shouldn't have a family.
Yeah, I don't think he ever takes care of his kids. He's literally only filming.
Yeah, it's
fucking
insane. No, like when it showed, you're probably gonna get to that part, but when it shows that he starts like his Banksy documentary and it shows like a minute or two of the footage, I was like, holy shit! I'm surprised this dude doesn't have people like strung up in his basement, torn apart. This is the inside of a fucking insane person.
So that's actually a big point, though, is that every single one of the street artists that they kind of look at, they don't go anonymous. They will let people see their face. They want to show the world their art, and they honestly want to capitalize on it a little bit by selling it so that they can make a living. Like, everybody in this world has to do something for money. So I don't slight artists for selling their art whatsoever, but we'll get in later where I start to think it draws the line.
Depends on what you call art. I'll say it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's like the whole point, is how do you determine what is art and what isn't art? But we're going to get to that later. Right now, we're just talking about what is in the documentary. So after he meets Banksy, starts to film him, Banksy is setting up for his first show in the U.S., which is called Barely Legal, I think.
Yeah, Barely Legal, yeah.
So while they're setting it up, bringing his art in, bringing in an elephant...
I did not like that elephant thing.
I didn't like the elephant thing either. It's pretty fucked up.
Because that one guy leading the elephant in definitely had one of those electric poker things, and that's
definitely.
How they were leading him.
But no elephants were harmed in the making of this movie, according to the end credits. However, I think painting the elephant was really what went over the edge for me. I understand that there's kind of a cultural thing, maybe, with painting elephants, but Banksy is very clearly not culturally around elephants. When he was younger, he's not part of that. I mean, he could be, honestly, because we don't know who he is, but all signs point to him being a white dude from England. So
yeah, exactly. He's been eating, fucking fried pies up somewhere in Yorkshire while he's learning how to spray paint shit on his grandma's yard. He doesn't know anything about elephants or painting.
He doesn't know anything about elephants. I like the idea of it. I don't.
Yeah, obviously, like, he's got points with his art, but I think
I mean, like, I like the idea of the elephant being spray painted to match the wallpaper. Like,
it was
that's
cool.
funny. I don't like doing it, though. If you animated
it's the elephant in the room, and it became the elephant in the room because people couldn't stop talking about the elephant in the room because it was painted. But
like, he's very punny at that shit. But...
It's like third grader like irony, and it's kind of fucking insane that people eat it up so much.
Yeah, I just found it like funny, the idea of it, but like I don't want to see it in like real life. It's like if you like made a painting that like if you turned it a certain way or like a sculpture or something, like yeah, I'd find that super funny. But the fact that
Like if he didn't use a live elephant, he'd be cool with it. Yeah, I think that's the general consensus is that he didn't actually have to use a live elephant, but that's just what he does.
Leave the elephant alone.
He's got to go for the shock value. So that actually brings us to the point that when Banksy was in Palestine and Israel, he became one of the first people to like make political statements, painting on the wall, in like actually professional portraits of these kids that were playing on the ground, and there was a crack in the wall and it showed paradise on the other side, which is just the stark contrast to the living conditions between Israelis and Palestinians. There's a lot of political messages in Banksy's stuff, and he very clearly takes his art seriously to the point that he believes what he's doing is important to the world, but he doesn't necessarily agree with the people who are capitalizing on their success, like holding art shows, auctioning off pieces, doing things such as that nature. But when he is setting up his own show, he gets the brilliant idea of, let's go to Disneyland and set up this like real life art piece of some dummies blown up with air, covered in Guantanamo Bay outfits, like bags over their heads, hands cuffed behind their backs. We'll just put them up in Disneyland to make a statement about Guantanamo Bay. I think this was around like 2007, 2008.
Yeah. In retrospect, terrible idea, but I think even during the time, they should have known that was going to be a real bad idea.
So yeah, what happens is they do this, and then they split up. So Terry's filming the entire endeavor, because he just does. Banksy goes and changes clothes, gets out of the park, but Terry is just walking with his camera towards the front. He starts to see some security start to gather around him, and he realizes, uh-oh, I'm about to get interrogated, which is kind of ironic because they're bringing in the attention to people getting interrogated in Guantanamo Bay, and then about to go get interrogated by Disneyland officials, which admittedly is probably a lot better.
I don't know. I think Disneyland would be the Guantanamo Bay of Southern California.
Maybe.
I think Disneyland just is the Guantanamo Bay of America, let's be honest. That's where you're fucking saying.
But, I mean, I would say maybe SeaWorld's the Guantanamo Bay, and maybe, like, that's a little worse, but that's just me. Anyway, Terry gets interrogated. In-Terry-Gated? Yeah, that was a really good one, right?
Interrogated. I was thinking that's Disney's next movie. Terry gets interrogated. He gets interrogated, huh, buddy?
Yeah. So he ends up not spilling the beans about Banksy, because at this point he knows what his face looks like. And he probably knows his real name, but he's not saying it to anybody. He hides the footage in his sock. He like takes the tape out and hides it real quick. Gets out, finds Banksy, and at that point Banksy's like, all right, you're cool. You didn't crack under the pressure. I believe you. Let's go. Let's do this. Afterwards, after his show and after everything, he's like, all right, I see all these people putting up shows in different places, making all this money, but that's not really what street art is about. Like, he sees Sotheby's and all these auction houses are having street art pieces, even his own pieces, and he's not stoked about it. Goes and says, all right, Terry, now's when you need to make your movie. You need to show the story of street art. Terry makes a movie. It's called Life Remote Control. It's literally just like 5 seconds of footage spliced over and over, like different 5-second things from all these thousands and thousands of tapes, which I understand it's really hard to make it through all those tapes. Like, he should have just been recording certain aspects so he didn't have to watch so much, but that's just who he was someone to videotape literally every aspect of his life.
Well, it wouldn't have been so bad if there was like, because it seemed at the beginning, I was like, oh, it's like in the old skate videos, they'd sometimes do that where it was like 3 seconds of footage snapped to 3 seconds,
and then it would go into the actual,
and
scene.
Then it would like go into a scene. I thought I was going to do that, I'd be like, oh, but it just kept on doing these 3-second snaps.
But I think that's what his point was. Like, calling it Life Remote Control is, somebody said it in the film, it was like watching someone with a remote control flipping through a cable box with 900 channels, and I'm just like, well, that's clearly maybe what he was going for, but it doesn't mean it necessarily makes it good.
Yeah, just because he was going for that effect doesn't mean it's a good idea.
So in order to actually tell the story, Banksy's like, all right, fuck it. I'm going to distract him. I'm going to tell him to make his own art show, and while he's doing that, I'm going to go edit this film and tell the real story. What he does in that process is Terry runs with it. He's like, all right, I'm going to be Mr. Brainwash, because everybody's like life is brainwashing everybody. I need to open their eyes and I need to brainwash them in another way. And he ends up like getting this moniker, not maybe a moniker, but like an illustration done of himself with his camera by somebody else, not even himself. He's not making the art. Somebody else does it. And then he starts putting that up everywhere in stickers, in murals, and whatever. And then he realizes, I can just get a show. So they rent out this big building. He starts delegating tasks because he's too busy with the other stuff. He goes through books, marks different pages, says, I want this thing matched with this other thing. Like, I want a Campbell's soup can matched up with a spray paint can. You, artist I hired, go do it. Like, so he's the visionary behind everything, but he's not actually doing the art, which is where some of this stuff comes in as like, so maybe it's not real art.
It's kind of crazy. Like, well, I think it's maybe fake because in Banksy trying to make this film about the true nature of art, he creates his worst fear, which is the utter and complete commercialization of art. He doesn't do any of his own art. He has a team of digital artists that do everything for him, and sculptors. They do does everything for him. All he does is tell them what to do, and it's all derivative of everybody's art that he has seen so far.
Andy Warhol, Banksy, like even a little bit of what's his name, Shepard Fairey, like even a little bit of the Obey. Like it's literally just a hodgepodge.
Yeah, let's put Marilyn Monroe's hair on literally fucking everybody and see what sticks. Let's put aliens in every, like, what is that old farmer couple? I can't remember the name. It's got a very famous name, but it's like literally let's put as much shit in like the background and the foreground of that painting as we can and see what people like. Oh, let's put aliens.
Isn't it American Gothic?
Yeah, it's American Gothic. Yeah. It's like, oh, let's put aliens in the back of American Gothic. Let's put like hats on them.
Let's turn the couple into Batman.
Like it's
really fucking.
It's terrible. He's silly. He's insane.
It's all derivative. It's all like very just photoshopped. He doesn't really do anything himself. He takes a lot of Jackson Pollock, too. He'll take something that's already printed out and on a canvas, and he'll just go over and splatter some paint
on it. So that's why I think it is...
Well, we'll get into the discussion later. Right now, we're still in the summary, man. We're still in the summary. We got to get through this. We're already over time. So he sees that Mr. Brainwash is having trouble getting everything done. Banksy sees this. Oh, also, I skipped over this part. Terry actually asks... Shepard Fairey to advertise his show, which he feels kind of weird. Yes, and then he asks Banksy for a quote. Banksy says, Mr. Brainwash is a phenomenon of nature, and I don't mean that in a good way. Terry takes that, puts it all over billboards, like advertises the shit out of the show. It is a resounding success. The public comes in, thinks it's the greatest thing they've ever seen, and every artist, like Shepard and Banksy and all the people who actually helped form this guy are just like, oh shit, what the fuck did we do?
What have we done?
This is terrible. I've never seen anything like this.
And the second, once he sets out the Banksy quote, he starts getting calls from people that want to pre-buy the art.
Yeah.
So like, he's like, oh yeah, $40,000 for this painting? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Because anything related to Banksy automatically had a 5-figure price tag. Even if it was just some like unrelated poser, which he is.
He is. But the fact that Banksy put his name on it automatically gave him the status of like, oh, Banksy thinks this is cool. I think it's cool.
But he didn't think it was cool, though.
He didn't think it's cool because he gave the quote without looking at the shit. That's all on Banksy. He's a fucking idiot. Like,
well, no, it's all part of the thing.
He brainwashed Banksy.
It could be just as much about like people thinking Banksy is somehow being ironic or being backwards or flippant the way he usually is. It was like he would say that about a great artist. He would say that they're terrible because, you know, it invades his art, blah blah blah, like bullshit.
But he actually
everybody jerks each other off. Like I like this movie. I like this movie in the beginning when it was very much like an old skate movie where it's just like jumping back and forth.
Awesome. That's why when I watched it, I was like, this is super cool. It's like all these cool, and Neckface is actually a pro skateboarder now for Baker. I found that out.
That's crazy.
Like,
but wait, I thought he's still anonymous.
No, Neckface is not anonymous.
Yeah, he is.
I don't think so. He puts his face on his Instagram.
What? Neckface. Give me a second.
It's like Nasty Neckface.
Is an anonymous graffiti artist.
Yep. I'm just saying, look at his Instagram, and maybe that's not his face, but I've seen him skate. Unless that's a different Neckface, but they have very, very similar art styles.
What if that's just a skateboard artist? He was like,
it could be.
Cool.
he might just be a poser, like taking Nick Face's stuff. But again, like basing on what we saw in the movie and what I've seen on his Instagram, they look pretty similar.
Yeah. Nick Face skateboard.
But I could be wrong. Anyway, the whole point of the movie, though, is Banksy is just like, I used to encourage everybody to do art. Now I don't do that.
That was my favorite line of the movie.
Yeah,
they're all just so pissed. They're all so butthurt that like this random idiot, and literally at some point somebody in the movie calls him a retard, which not very PC, but at the moment I can see their frustration as he's like, it's in reference, like he's like, he won't stop talking to a reporter, but he also like won't give anybody more than like one or two steps from his directions at a time. So they're all struggling to find places to put up all of his thousands and thousands of pieces of art.
Yeah, like literally more art than group shows have.
Yeah. And like he does seem like a dum-dum, and he managed to capitalize basically stealing a bunch of people's art because he had connections.
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily call him dumb. I think he's crazy, and I think he's got a lot going on in his brain, which is why it's like a mishmash of everything he's experienced. And I don't know if that necessarily makes him dumb, but it definitely makes him not able to really form coherent thoughts.
No, I think he's dumb, and I think everyone around him was dumb.
No,
yeah.
I think,
and also it doesn't help that he's foreign and doesn't really grasp the English language as well as someone like Banksy or Shepard Fairey. But we are drastically over time. We need to move on to your domains. Yeah. But I love this movie. I think it's a great kind of started out as a romantic look back at the street art community and how it got its roots planted, and then kind of through where we are today. Mr. Brainwash is actually like a successful artist now. He did the artwork for Madonna's Celebration CD, I think, in 2009. It was just Madonna's face with the Marilyn Monroe hair.
But, it's like he's a visionary. He's a real Julius Caesar. Who are we?
Let's move on to Keenan.
Hey, y'all.
All
right, yo, guys. Best in Show is what I'm repping. I thought about it because whenever I think of documentaries, and especially because of like the sort of attitudes portrayed in Exit Through the Gift Shop, I thought of Best in Show. Best in Show is a mockumentary comedy, like I said, released in 2000, written by Christopher Guest and Eugene Levy. Two very funny guys, if you don't know them. It's also directed by Christopher Guest. It's about, I think it's like 5 groups, I guess that you want to say, because it's about 5 entrants into a dog show. And it's like I said, it's filmed like a documentary. They go around interviewing all the couples or the owners with their dogs. And it gets almost surreal because they're just all these really weird, borderline vain, people. The one couple who Eugene Levy's wife. Every time they go on a road trip to go to the show, and every time they bump into someone, they keep bumping into people she slept with at some one point in her life. Or there's this one couple that has I don't know dogs. It's
you don't know.
I don't know dogs. It's a Weimar Unarmer. It's a large dog.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, it's a gun dog. It's some sort of anyway, the point is, I don't know. It looks like a blue tick hound, but I'm sure that's really wrong. I'm sure dog people are gonna respond to this podcast and get really angry at me. But anyway, they're this really uptight upper class family that really want their dog to win. They're in therapy because their dog, they're worried about their dog. At one point, a famous scene from the show is that they think their dog's freaking out because they don't have their toy bee. And the dog's just kind of sitting there, but they're yelling at each other to go find the effing bee because they're freaking out about it, which was very funny, and they can't have sex around the dog because they're worried about the dog, its impact on the dog's behavior. But the reason why I thought about this is because, one, it's a very funny movie, and it's filmed like a documentary, a lot like the film we're talking about. It's filmed like one, but it's not one. And 2, because except for maybe a few of the characters in Best in Show, they're all really, really like pretentious and arrogant and like self-absorbed people. And that reminded me a lot of the people in Exit Through the Gift Shop. And, I thought the parallels there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to be an artist and not be pretentious in some way, but...
Yeah.
Tell that to Mel
Come
Brooks.
with the territory.
I guess. I mean, that's like the whole nature of being like an artist as opposed to like being...
I mean, the nature of art is that it is pretense in some way, in my opinion.
I guess. But, I don't know. I think sometimes people just do stuff because, like, I don't know. In my opinion, sometimes, like artists, like, take Adam Sandler, go off topic. We'll discuss it later. Anyway, Best in Show, very funny movie. I just thought of, like, comparing, like, even though this is, like, a comedy, and not meant to be taken seriously at all, I still felt very much the same attitudes. And, like, I thought, this reminds me a lot of Best in Show. Which is probably not, like, a good thing on it does not bode well for the actual people represented in Exit Through the Gift Shop.
But yeah, thank you for letting us know about Best in Show. I honestly think I would really like that because it seems like it would almost be a mockumentary type, like The Office or something, and I liked that way of telling the story.
Yeah, it's like that. It's very funny.
So yeah, I'll probably check that out. Let's move on to Rye Dog. What you got for me?
My domain this week is the titular podcast known as S-Town. It's a 7-episode series hosted by This American Life producer Brian Reed. The impetus for the series, they received a string of emails and were called a bunch by a guy by the name of John B. Micklemore, I think his name is. That's how you pronounce his last name. In the emails and the phone calls, he described like this really kind of like tragic small town conspiracy where the son of a rich tycoon, like rich air quotes for this town tycoon, like killed some kid at this party, and through old school nepotism and power brokering and blah, 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 was able to get away with it. And like everybody forgot about this other kid. They were hesitant to do it because this guy kind of seemed like a nut job. But over time, as he emailed them more and more, and Brian like talked to this guy more and more, he started to also become very interested in John. He's a very like eccentric, strange man with a lot of very interesting ideas. He's hard to describe. Yeah, you have to listen to the thing. He's all over the place. He's always like lamenting about the state of the world and the way the politics are moving. And the first 2 episodes focus specifically on the murder allegations that John brought up to Brian. And it kind of leads to Brian running some of these rumors and hearsay to ground and finding out slowly but surely that doesn't seem to be true. It may not necessarily have been a whole fabrication by John, but it was definitely a like maybe small town gossip, how things kind of like spread and grow and change. And he just happened to be the last person to hear onto the story. But it all kind of unravels. And spoiler alert, if you want to listen to S-Town, this is going to be a major spoiler. I'll give people like 2-3 seconds to turn off their podcast right now.
Well, 3, the editor can just be like, insert.
3, 2, 1. But at the end of the 2nd episode, Brian gets a call, I believe, from a relative of John, and he finds out that John committed suicide by drinking poison. And the next 7 episodes are kind of how, like this weird combination. I feel like it maybe not the first time that somebody had died in this podcast producer's life, but maybe the first time it just seemed so random. And I think he'd really grown attached to John in certain ways. He'd gone over to visit. He had learned about his like personal story. So the next 5 episodes in the 7-episode series are predominantly about Brian kind of, I don't want to say taking apart, but more like picking at John's life and trying to figure out why he killed himself potentially, and also trying to maybe, I think, also sort through his own feelings about why John killed himself. Yeah. So it's definitely the episodes that follow are a thorough excavation of the enigma that is John B. Micklemore. He's supposedly like I keep on saying like, but he's supposedly super rich for some reason, but people aren't sure. They find out he is, he seems to be a very smart man. He created I can't remember what it was, but like a topiary garden maze type thing where if you, depending on how you open and shut these little gates, it actually changes the solution there. So there's like a bunch of different solutions to this little maze depending on how, in the order of which you shut off these little gates. So it's really kind of cool. The guy's very clever. They find out he was a horologist, which is basically a fancy word for man that really likes clocks.
Yeah, but isn't that just clocks?
But they also dig into things like his sexuality, some of his morals, and more importantly, how they changed over time. They found out that he, early in life, was kind of a closeted bigot, but over time, for whatever reason, they never really pinned down why, he becomes like a very liberal, left-leaning person, very much like we need equality, we need people to be on the same level, we need equity between the races. But what they find out before that, earlier in life, he was kind of a racist guy. And I chose this predominantly because I do feel like there's a very similar tonal shift. Because it's a documentary podcast. The first 2 episodes, very run-of-the-mill documentary, kind of in the same vein as a lot of This American Life stuff. And I don't know if you guys have seen Serial, where it's kind of like very much on the issue. It's him kind of thoroughly trying to sift through the details of this murder case. And then
so do they ever finish the murder investigation, or does he just drop it all together?
Or is it just like all but BS?
The first 2 episodes really cover. I can't remember exactly when he finds out that there was no murder.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember if it's the second episode or it's a little bit later on that he's got like definite proof there's no murder. But he talks to the son of like the rich. I can't remember if it was like a logging company or something like that. But the son of the rich tycoon. And he freely admits, like, I never killed anybody. I don't even remember being at that party.
Well, I mean, like, if you killed somebody and somebody was asking you that question, would you say, "Oh yeah, I totally did it"?
I mean, but he had a pretty solid alibi. If I remember correctly, he had a pretty solid alibi, and then he finds the person that's I can't remember. I might be mixing it up with something else in my head, but I'm pretty sure he finds the person that's supposed to be dead.
Oh, okay. Well, that would definitely seem to exonerate him.
But from every angle that he investigates, he finds that this guy did not actually kill this guy, or that there was no murder per se. Not that there's others not to say that there's other weird, shitty stuff happening in the story. But like going back, I picked it because the tonal shift is very similar to the Banksy doc. It starts out very much a strict documentary, kind of talking about Guetta's like interaction with the street art movement in the same way that Brian is kind of running some of these murder leads and investigating. And then there's a tonal shift where everything kind of flips on its head and it kind of becomes about the person making the documentary. So it kind of flips and you learn a lot about Brian in the process, maybe how he deals with death and why he's so interested in John. And then it also kind of flips into more of a less hardcore documentary and more just like an introspective about mortality and how people change over time and how certain random things can lead up to somebody's death. So they found out in his adventures as a horologist, back when it was really hot in the 90s and 80s, he was one of the few people that did a very specific type of like metal work on clocks that involved mercury.
Oh.
And like kind of like boiling mercury to kind of get I think it was a gold finish or a silver finish. I can't remember. It's been a little while since I've listened to the podcast, but nobody does it anymore because it's so insanely dangerous for you. Like it will kill you, or I think it'll do the same thing with like the Mad Hatter disease used to be a real disease that
because they would use mercury to measure heads. They would use mercury in the process for like fitting hats. So you would slowly but surely kind of lose your mind. And they think that may have had something to do with why he killed himself. But they think the reasons for him killing himself are much and varied. And you can never really figure out why somebody finally decided to do something
unless they like leave a note. There's no real way.
Yeah, even then.
And even with the note, like there's so many factors that go into mental health. It's impossible unless the person fails in committing suicide and they can tell you exactly why they did it afterwards. But sometimes the people that do it don't even know why they did it. It was a Tuesday. Like it can be so random, the conflicts of events that like leads to somebody committing suicide.
I would like to say on a serious note, since we were talking about like a pretty heavy subject in suicide, if any of our viewers are thinking about or know somebody who is talking about or thinking about suicide, reach out for help.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there are several methods of doing so. The suicide hotline, you can see a therapist. Like, just please don't try to beat it on your own, or like get help. Everybody wants everybody to stay alive.
There's no shame in asking for help.
Exactly. Everybody needs help, no matter what. I don't care who the fuck you are. You can't do everything on your own.
But yeah, I'm sorry if I brought down the podcast a bit, but that is my domain for this week.
All right. Well, moving away from such a heavy topic, let's go for a tonal shift and move on to the discussion section. You like what I did there, Ryan?
Oh, God. I loved it.
Alrighty. I guess the main thing that I took away from Exit Through the Gift Shop is obviously Banksy's existential crisis. How the fuck do you say that?
Existential.
You said it right the first time, I thought.
I feel like I stuttered a little bit. I don't know. Anyway, Banksy's existential crisis about, like, he created a monster, and if any old average Joe can be successful as a street artist, what makes Banksy so special? Like, how do you determine what is and is not art?
That's why I think the whole documentary is fake, because he created his antithesis. Well, he is supposed to be like the authentic, real street artist by telling...
So you think that it's fake?
I kind of... Like, I'm not sure what I think. I think it'd be very reasonable for it to be fake, because...
You think Terry is not a real person and he was an actor hired to be character?
I think Terry is a real person. I think that Banksy was like, we're going to do something fucking really cool, you're going to make some money, and I'm going to make a statement about, like, the frivolity and the dumbassness of art.
I get behind that.
Shit, I didn't even think about that.
I think he was pissed that people, because I mean, it even happens now. I read an article maybe a couple months ago. If Banksy does a piece of art on somebody's building, there is a art dealer on site within 30 minutes, and they are already talking with like contractors to remove brick from buildings. His art lives on the street it can be measured in hours now before it's being sold somewhere.
Oh my god, man.
Like there was that
I
one...
would love to just like paint over it.
There was that one instance where he made like the phone booth that was kind of like fucked up, and he just left it on the street, and then somebody picked it up and sold it at Sotheby's for $550,000.
Yeah, some crazy amount of money. So I think this is him kind of yelling into the wind about how dumb and like basically how dumb people are about art.
Yes, yelling into his Oscar-nominated wind.
Like just because things are done by a certain person doesn't make them any better than like.
Exactly. And just because he gives like credence he straight up and I think that's what works into it. He insulted Guetta. He said this guy is not like he's a phenomenon. He is a force of nature in a bad way. He is a dummy and he doesn't know art. But just because I think that's the whole point. His art is fake.
In the documentary, he made that point, but like at the time, he just said that quote. He didn't add any additional context. Like
I think at the time he knew, and like even if it wasn't fake, I think at the time he knew, because a real artist wouldn't have asked to pay somebody to upsell their art, especially another famous artist.
That point there.
The whole point of street art is you put it on the street, people like it, and then maybe, just maybe, you make a little money off of it in the future.
So that's where Banksy gets into the like origins and the purpose of street art was not necessarily to make money. It was like just to make statements. It's an expression of your frustrations, your emotions, and how you're viewing the world around you. And that's like definitely evident in Banksy's art, because he's making statements about politics. He's making statements about injustices among the world. He's making statements of somebody dressed up in black with a bandana over his mouth, throwing something that looks like a Molotov cocktail, and then, it's flowers. Like, and then you look at someone like Mr. Brainwash's art, which is literally just photoshopped other people's stuff and, like, trying to claim it as his own style, which everybody in the history of anything, besides maybe, like, a very small amount of people who are pioneers in their craft, are inspired by something or another. Like, every single artist has somebody they looked up to or drew inspiration from, or even nature. Like, they look at nature and they're inspired by nature. Like, nobody is 100% original. So I cannot slight anybody for taking, like, bits and pieces.
But I will say this, you could take it as an insult or maybe just a comment on his art form. Geta, or was it Mr. Brainwash?
Mr. Brainwash.
Both.
Mr. Brainwash is the visual equivalent of a mashup artist.
Yes, he is. He's literally like a middle school art project.
Yeah.
Of somebody trying to emulate Andy Warhol, and it's not good.
I'm not saying there's not art in taking other people's art and making something new. I'm just saying I don't think that was really his intention. I think it was literally just, how much shit can I glob together and will it still look okay?
The biggest thing that killed me is he, like, almost made a point that could have been very, like...
What do you mean?
Transcendent. He had this one piece where he took a picture of Elvis, who used to have a guitar, photoshopped in a Fisher-Price, like, toy AR-15 or some shit, and he was like, it's just, like, don't be cruel. And I'm just like, or you could make the statement that kids are constantly, like, being shoved these military-esque toys when they're young to, like, possibly make them want to become soldiers when they grow up. And that's, like, fine. People can totally become soldiers, but we're brainwashing kids. Like, his whole point is he's Mr. Brainwash. He could have showed how fucked up it is that we make army toys for little kids.
Repetitive nature, because the reason he said he became Mr. Brainwash is, like, the repetitive nature of art. Like, what he saw in Shepard Fairey.
Shepard Fairey literally uses the same fucking picture
hundreds and thousands of times.
Just Andre the Giant.
Just through sheer, like, force of will and repetitiveness, he was able to force that kind of concept into being. And they talk about that in documentary, about it, like, forcing this concept, and by forcing it, people start talking about it, and it becomes a thing of its own.
That's the whole point, is, like, Banksy mentions that when Andy Warhol first started out, he was taking these images that are so mundane, so ubiquitous to everybody, that he then put them in the spotlight and repeated them over and over and over until they became meaningless. And he said that Terry, Mr. Brainwash, took multiple images and then just kept repeating them over and over, so everything is meaningless.
Yeah,
I don't know about, like, that
he
conclusion that they brought from it. You know, I don't know. I think a lot of this documentary is just a lot of people reading too much into, like, themselves and their own arts and other people's art. I'm just like, I mean, maybe it's just, you know, that's a shitty image, you know?
I mean,
that's how I view this documentary, though, is it's like every single person in it, as we're going up and seeing that it's a documentary, and then, we're looking at this guy who's not an artist who has now taken over, they all feel like they have to defend themselves and prove that they're actually real artists while trying to tear down this man who is just doing something that he wants to do and doesn't see the problem in it. But they're trying to nitpick ways to not criticize the things he took from them, to then make themselves feel validated that, I'm a real artist, he stole from me, and then all these other things he did are bad. Like, Banksy straight up was just like, I don't know what to think anymore. And then Shepard Fairey is sitting there like, I had good intentions, I think. And
yeah.
Like,
I mean, I would be more on Mr. Brainwash's side if any of that art was actually his art. What he did was, like, he stood in front of a room of people that were at their computers and was like, hey, you know what would be really cool? If we put, like, Madonna hair. No, if we put, like, Marilyn Monroe hair on Madonna or Ronald Reagan. Or what if we put aliens in American Gothic? He never... And that's, like, as much as I have mixed feelings about Banksy, I think it's one of those things that it was more... it's the mystique of him more than the quality of
It's
his
definitely
art.
yeah. So I want to talk about
Like a
that.
lot of his stuff. It's like I'm not a huge art guy, but I mean I like his pieces too. I think they're provocative and I think they say something, but I don't think people should be yanking out pieces of wall and paying $100,000 for what is a stencil painting of a man throwing a bunch of flowers.
With the whole thing that he did with his painting, he
so
knew that this one would.
Sorry. No, you can. I was just gonna have a thought, but I guess you probably had a better one.
He straight up knew that one of his paintings would possibly eventually make it to auction, and rigged it so that whenever it sold, it would shred part of itself.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Good for him.
Yeah, so like he knew he doesn't want the money. He wants to make these points, and obviously he has to sell some stuff every now and then. But when he puts his art up on a wall, he doesn't see any of that. That's like some art broker buys it off of the person who owns the building because they technically own the art now, and then they sell it off in an auction.
I buy it to an extent, but that art piece, by the sheer fact of him making it so a part of it destroys itself, he made it worth so much more than what the person bought for it. So it's like this ironic
that's not his
struggle of him. By him trying to destroy his art, he makes it more valuable. By him trying to make his art worthless, he makes it worth more. And
he's trying to prove a point that people will buy anything and like people are stupid, but all that does is make them want his stuff more. Like,
it's just this self-feeding thing where I think the more he fights, he fights his kind of mediocre quality, like this mediocre quality of the art world where it's all about what's buying, what's hot, and what's now, not really about the substantive nature of the art and like what it makes you feel. That as more he does it, the more he's like fighting this averseness to an emotional reaction other than coolness. He creates this coolness that people want to buy into. People don't want to be wanted. Like that is what, like people want to feel rejection on some level, and if an artist rejects them, they kind of like it.
What are you talking about? I don't know about that.
It's the same reason why like fucking rock stars can spit on their fans and they're just like, oh yes, I love it. Thank you.
It's how Steve Aoki can throw a birthday cake into the crowd.
Well, that's honestly just like a little bit enjoyable because it's at least tasty when it hits you. Like,
I mean,
at least you get hit by a cake. It's still cake.
People just want what they can't have, and what they want.
That's it. They want what they can't have. They want something that's mysterious. Banksy, in and of itself,
he's a mystery.
It could be more than one person. We don't fucking know. But like the fact that he's stayed anonymous, the fact that he purposely doesn't want you to have his art, makes it so much more valuable to the random consumer. Whereas like other street artists are capitalizing off that. They're just like, people like my art, cool. I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna like make a living so I can stop living in a 20 square foot apartment. Sick. Like whatever. That's your prerogative. I don't know who Banksy thinks he is that he can dictate what is and is not art. That's my whole point about this is like the intentions of the art, which we're going to get into that because Austin has a question about the intentions. And like, I don't necessarily think profiting off of something that you do is wrong and makes it any less valuable.
I don't hate Banksy as a person for making money off his art. I hate Banksy because of the pretentious nature that he fights his art.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, just like if you want to make
I don't hate him for that either. Like I think he's cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think he's making statements, but I kind of hate this kind of like self-defeating, like I hate the way that my art is loved kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I think if he was just a little less, if he was a little less anxious about why people liked his art, people would maybe like his art a little less, and he would be okay with it.
Well, hopefully he becomes unanonymous someday so we see the man behind the...
the second that he puts his face on the internet, his art will stop selling. I
don't think so. I think what's going to happen is if he turns out to be this other certain person, it's going to up the popularity of his older stuff before he adopted the Banksy moniker. But that's a whole other story for a different podcast.
It's like, how much can you rage against the establishment when you become the establishment?
No, like that, like when you come right down to it, Banksy, you act like, you're some sort of like messiah and stuff. You're like educated, like you're the only great artist left. And sometimes how the way, in my opinion, he portrays himself, a lot like the people on the Best in Show are like, this is the best dog. It's like, well, you know what? In my opinion, the end of like Best in Show is all about how they're all good dogs. Because you want to know who, like, I don't want to spoil anything for you.
They're all good boys.
Yeah, but like I don't want to spoil it for you. But like all these people who you think are gonna win, like odds are, like in the show, don't win, and like they all take like so much effort about it, and like they have a little like post, like epilogue, kind of like a few scenes of like post interviews, where they interview all like the people, and they're all just kind of still living their lives with their dogs. They're like something they cared, and they got so like manic and neurotic about. Turns out, oh wait, well we went home, and we hung out with our dogs.
So the dogs are the art, and all the art in that show or in that documentary is like the same to you. Like every piece of art has its own inherent value.
Yeah, I think it all has.
Might be inflated to the artist itself, but like in general.
Yeah, I think
it's all pretty much the same.
Yeah, like I think all like the art, like the dogs, is still like a bunch of it is kind of cool. Don't get me wrong. Personally, I think the only really good artist there is Space Invader because that's fun. You know, like
that's okay.
That's
like
cute.
in my opinion, like if I was walking down the street and I saw any other given like artist, maybe Neckface because I think it's like kind of like spooky. Like that's cool. You know,
Space Invader is the pug of art.
Yeah, but like if I saw like a
cute.
Space
I like
Invader
it.
mosaic,
It can't
on, like,
breathe
a
right,
subway,
but we
I'd be
like it.
You know what? That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad it exists.
That's fair.
But do I think that any of them like, you know, like I said, like you know, are like steering the course of human destiny and influencing the masses and like are true artists and like they represent so much ideas? Like, I mean, no.
Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah.
Some of those
People
things
like
I would say no, but like, are they true artists? I think they're probably true artists.
I think they're artists.
What I mean
I think they don't
true
have.
Artists, though, I don't.
Do I
mean,
think they're steering humanity? Probably not.
No. What I say about true artists is what I think they themselves think of themselves as. Because I don't think anyone's like really like I don't even really know what a true artist is. But I think there's a bunch of artists that act like they know, like Banksy, for example, like where he said like, "Oh, I used to say that everyone can do art, but now I'm pretty sure that I'm."
I don't know if you said everybody can. I think you said everybody should try.
Yeah, no, and like I think that's right. Everyone should try. Like, cool, try to express yourself, try to say something, try to have an opinion.
Yeah.
But like, I think like by him saying that like he doesn't do that anymore and I don't think it's because like because I don't like saying the words to people anymore. I don't really talk to people anymore. I'm kind of shy. No, it's like I don't think anyone should have this power. It's like I mean, no offense, Banksy, I don't think you have this power. Let's be perfectly honest. I don't think like I said, I just think they take themselves so seriously. They're just so like into themselves and the like the idea that they have of themselves, and their art is like ridiculous.
That's inherent to anybody, in my opinion, who like chooses a stage name or something. It's like there's so much more of a person that they don't deserve to use their real name. Like they have to go with this moniker. But we need to get the fuck on because we are drastically over time, like even worse than before.
Yeah, fuck the editor. What?
Sorry, Chowder.
Yo, Chowder, I love you, but I also hate this.
We do have one listener question. It's from our very own, actually, R.I.P. Austin Liebers. I forgot that you died on this podcast, technically.
Dead.
Post-mortem comment.
He says,
grave.
Patrick, I thought you didn't like philosophy. That's a whole other story. Anyway, I think the creator of a thing...
Oh,
no. I'm going through.
Sorry.
Calm your tits. Anyway, this is still Austin talking. Anyway, I think the creator of a thing has to have a particular kind of intention or one of a particular class of intentions in mind when creating that thing for it to be art. With that particular intention, or what that particular intention or class is, I'm not sure. But I also think it's just as important to ask what makes art good during and after this film, and maybe just in life generally. And to that, I would say the thing that makes art good is purely subjective to whoever is looking at the art.
Agreed.
Like, I have looked at some art that is widely regarded as being some of the best. Like, I can appreciate the technique and the masterful skill of honing your craft over years and decades to be able to make things that are so intricate and so ornate and just so like uniquely your own style. But that doesn't mean I necessarily enjoy looking at your art. Like, for instance, I enjoy like Salvador Dali and things like that, but to me, M.C. Escher is very boring and very like overrated. But I enjoy Banksy. I think his art is like interesting, but someone like Keenan thinks it's trash. So
I don't think it's trash.
Mona Lisa's dog shit.
yeah.
You know.
Then yeah, like
Mona Lisa's a lot
I
smaller than you think it is, okay, and that's what pissed me off. But I think that's not his fault.
Don't understand the hype behind a lot of these art pieces that are deemed as classics. Really don't do it for me. But I think it's purely just up to the eye of the beholder. Like,
I agree.
Yeah, I think you can't really classify art. It's all subjective. Yeah. Like I remember back, maybe a little while ago, they had a monkey draw on canvas, and then they sold it as like some random guy from France or something like that. And they ended up selling like really well because people thought it was really good art. And I mean, it just leads you to believe that art doesn't really have to mean anything. It doesn't have to mean anything to the creator as long as it means something to you. I think it has value.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's all about your impression of it, you know. But I do think that at a certain point, I've actually, like, know a little bit about this. There's actually a real problem in the art society because the thing is, it's
monkey artists.
Well, yeah, monkey artists, yeah, monkey with paintbrushes. The thing is, it's not really the artist or even like the people who decide if an artist is good. It's art society, which notoriously just kind of decides things. You know, like this season it's going to be blue. It's going to be the color to wear. Like,
there's always like the trends that are going through and all these things. But there was one I distinctly remember. I said distinct so many times, but I remember on Reddit like a couple of years ago while I was still in college, there was a post on an art-based subreddit of somebody who spray painted this really cool like Futurama meme that was actually like pretty kind of thought-provoking onto an electrical box. And somebody commented saying, "That's not art, that's vandalism." And I was like, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, you can do both. Don't get me wrong.
So, yeah.
Banksy for life.
Just because you disagree with their medium or their method doesn't necessarily make it not art. It is still illegal. It is still a crime defined by the vandalism laws, sure. But it's still art to me.
I mean, like, legality doesn't describe art. Like, in World War II, a lot of art was made illegal that could be potentially seen as untoward towards
we're still trying to search for shit.
Or any kind of dictator.
The guy who put the suspension wire between the World Trade Center, you know, the Twin Towers. He was arrested afterwards. I think he was like given like a pay $5 like some joke fucking punishment. But the point is, like, there were still cops up there for like half an hour. But yeah, no, I hate that whole excuse. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, my father manages property, and like he super hates vandalism because like he is someone who has to deal with like painting over it and stuff. But like, I'll be honest, like I don't think that's less art. I would wish like some artists were more considerate about their street art. Like, I don't know, like I know there's like a lot of like
Can
art.
you put up a canvas on this wall and then paint the canvas instead of the wall, please?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
I know there was a place in Baltimore where people could go and they could spray paint. It was just like some abandoned building that everybody was like, all right, if you wanna paint up a building, paint up inside here. And I know until recently, I think it was like redone or whatever recently, and they're no longer allowed to paint there. But for a while, it was a place for people to do stuff like that, which is I think very considerate.
So I think like to summarize Austin's point, I think good art can be a lot of things. It can be somebody showing off like a technique that they've mastered, somebody showing off a style that they have created. But it's really like up to whoever's seeing it. If you enjoy art, it's good to you. Nobody can say what is good and what is not good, because it's completely up to them. But in terms of the intention, I think that's where I draw the line on real and fake art. Like, if your intention is to mass produce something and just sell it off to the masses because, like, you want money, that's not art to me. If you're making it and also making a profit off of it, but the real point was for you to just, you wanted to get this idea out, you wanted to spread it. If that's your intention, I think go ahead, that's art, whatever. Even if you didn't intend on people to see it, if you just wanted to get an idea and expression out onto the world, that could also be art. Alright, we gotta move on. We're getting real into like almost 2 hours now. Thank you. We are now moving on to the ratings, and I think what I'm gonna have to you guys do is rate this from
1 out of 5 spray cans.
No, that's too obvious.
1 out of 5 stencils.
Can you let me think, please? Jeez.
1 out of 5.
We're gonna go
with
dumbass French
stupid mustaches.
I'm gonna do 1 out of 5 pictures.
His fucking
of Andre
sideburns,
the
those
Giant.
crazy fucking
You know what?
sideburns.
I just want to say 5 pictures of Andre the Giant because I love that man.
Okay, but that's not what you're rating. You're rating
All right,
the top.
well, I give you 5 pictures of Andre the Giant for the idea of the 5 pictures of Andre the Giant. Boom.
Well, thank you.
It's a great idea. I love it.
Okay, but now what about the topic of...
That's right. I go first. For the topic, I'd give this 5. Because I actually really enjoyed this discussion. I think there's a lot of good thoughts there.
Woo! Wait! Let's go!
Now you're deflecting. You said discussion. What did you think about the documentary?
Ended up, if it's fake, I think that has a certain amount of humor in it.
Bro, you can't do this to me. You've given me 5 pictures of Andre the Giant 3 times now. I need to know what you give the topic.
Yeah, the topic. Like
the documentary is the topic, not the podcast. Oh my god!
Wow. No, I thought,
I've had so much fun with you
get this
guys.
mixed
5
up.
stars.
That's my bad. As for the documentary, I give that like 1.
Bro,
oh my god.
Fuck
it
you.
starts off as like really interesting and kind of like street art. I'm like, yeah, but then it just turns into this really self-serving, self-absorbed.
I thought mine was gonna be low.
Tantrum almost about like, oh, what about my art? And everyone's like, but my art, like, it could have been really cool if they just like went through and just talked to like each artist about their art and not made it about like some whole statement about themselves rather than just, hey, so like, what do you make? Oh, I make this. Oh yeah, so what are some of your influences? Well, I really like this guy and this guy. So it was just like more, I don't know, like, didn't feel
I think
honest.
that would be boring as shit.
No, I'd be more, it's a documentary.
Okay,
it's not
but
supposed to be entertaining.
It's not a documentary. You said it yourself. It's not a documentary. It started out as a documentary.
Exactly, because it's not a documentary. It became like a masturbation circle jerk is what
Whatever.
it became. Sorry, you know what? That's 1 fucking picture of Andre the Giant. You treasure that shit,
I will.
right?
I will take that shit to the grave. Ryan, what
Good.
do you think about our topic?
Yeah, Ryan.
I'm gonna give the documentary. I'm gonna be straight to
If
the
you
point.
give me 1, I'm
unlike
gonna
my co-host.
cry.
I'm not gonna give you. I'm gonna give 3.
Okay, I'm cool with 3.
And my reason for 3, if it was like a straight up skate documentary where it focused on the exploits of Banksy and what's his face Ferry, I don't know, I can't remember. Shepard's Ferry,
right?
and also some of these like lesser known guys, it would have been structured exactly like an old school skate video.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, where it like bounced around between them doing crazy ass shit and like making real art. I would have loved it. It'd have been like a 4 or a 5.
Well, yeah, you're supposed to hate Terry. That's the whole point. Like, that's the thing that
Yeah,
kills
but
me
I
about
don't
this is people give it a low rating because they don't like Terry. But the whole point of the documentary is to show, or the whole point of this film is to show that, like, this kind of person is supposed to be unlikable. It's like when people...
Yeah, but of course we know that. Why do you want to watch 2 hours of an unlikable person?
It's not 2 hours. Like, the whole thing was an hour and a half, and the part where Terry's in, it's only an hour. Like...
But wait, Pat, I understand I'm not supposed to like Terry, but here's the thing. I don't like to watch gross shit. That's why you don't see me watching 2 Girls, 1 Cup. There's a reason why people are unlikable and people don't like him is because he's a genuinely unlikable person to be the focus. And like, I get the message. Like, overall, I liked the movie. I thought the message it was trying to sell was a good one, and I thought it was an interesting story. But you can't force feed me Terry and expect
I'm not
me
saying
to be
he's
like,
cool.
oh,
I'm
that's
just
so
saying
cool.
you
He's
need
like
time
this,
to develop
like,
Terry as a person and turn him into the villain of the film. I mean, I thought he was the villain, but
it wasn't even really that it was the villain. I just found, oh, he's like, I guess he's kind of the villain. I just found the end part so cringeworthy.
I guess
I didn't enjoy his journey to victory. If he was like a real villain that I felt was more, he was trying to be a bad guy, he was trying to make a buck just based off of bullshit. But what I really saw was them kind of, I mean, I still think it's partially fake, but the story they were trying to sell was made it seem like they got some dumb French guy and they molded him in a way to make him seem to be a villain, but he wasn't really a villain, he was just a bumbling idiot. He was a Mr. Magoo of art who fumbled his way into making money because Banksy and other artists backed him. And then they want to make you feel bad about liking his art or thinking his art is good. So, I mean, I thought the message of the movie was a little blurred. I liked the overall beginning of the movie, but I just thought the message was blurred. It's like, oh, everybody should do art, but don't do art if you're going to be bad in a way that we don't like. Like, you're going to make money and be bad. So I think it's sending a whole bunch of mixed messages. And I just don't find Terry... Like, originally I found Terry to be a likable person. I thought he was a cool, crazy man. But in the end, it showed him to be just like everybody fucking else. The second he gets a second of fame, he becomes an intolerable prick and bosses everybody around.
Everybody besides Banksy, who keeps himself anonymous. Like, what do you mean, bro? Banksy's totally different, man.
Yeah. I mean, I just... Yeah, everybody that's the... gets. Yeah.
I just want to be clear that was my sarcasm voice to everybody.
No emails,
don't at me. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my main argument against the film. It's sending all these mixed signals, and then it makes Terry into a very unlikable villain. Like, I don't hate Terry because he's trying to sell his art and make money off his art. I dislike Terry because he's a forced villain that I think he's just like a dumb guy that wants to do fun things, and they made him out to be a bad guy because of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's a very typical response when you get a little bit of notoriety or fame to try and like squeeze that orange as much as you can and get every last drop. And to the outsider, it makes you look like a complete douche. And he looked like a complete douche.
I also think it's a totally normal response to when somebody else is coming up in your field. Yeah. You kind of want to tear them down to make yourself feel like more important, which is what I think Banksy ended up doing with this.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are so overtime. This is insane. But I still have to give out a Gold Star Student Award to the person I think best kind of not necessarily responded to the art portion, or it's the person who kind of gave me a new perspective, the person who best opened my eyes to a different way to look at the film that I brought, that I had never looked at it in a way before, and that person will be Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan!
Hey! I'm coming for you, Pat. I'm coming for you. I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get the belt.
Still my belt for now, bitch, but I had heard theories that it was like a prankumentary that they were trying to, and I think Keenan even brought this up before we even started, but the way I didn't think of it as Banksy taking this bumbling idiot and purposely turning into something. I still thought it was like an accidental thing, but you made a lot of interesting points about this is a very Banksy thing to do, would be to build up this guy who's a nobody to anybody and prove that like people are just susceptible and dumb and will buy anything. Yeah, so I think that would be where you kind of took the lead. I also am so interested in this podcast that you brought that I have to go listen to it just so I can understand.
It's super solid and you will cry at the end.
I plan on it. Anyway, that about wraps it up. Thank you all for listening to the Common Geeking Program. We love making this show. I love talking about this shit. I'm your host, Pat. You can find me at Patty Ice Official on Instagram and Purifery on Twitter. I will say it yet again. Don't choose your Twitter handle when you're 13. I've been joined by...
Yo, what's up? It's me, Keenan. You know, if you're looking for me, don't. I don't need your validation.
Okay. Ryan.
Hey, I'm Ryan Mossberger, and you can find me at Arkham Maxim Security Prison. And I'm fighting this arson conviction from my bank cell. And if you need to get at me, go to my GoFundMe for my lawyer. Holla at your boy. Send a $5. Or tweet at me at Ryan_MOSSB.
Anyway, the next episode is actually going to be hosted by our very own Ryan, so I hope you can get some stuff in prison. You want to tell us what that one's going to be about?
It's going to be about The Good Place. An NBC, I guess it would be a sitcom by Michael Schur. He wrote on The Office. He was the show creator of Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He is one of my favorite content creators, and his newest show, The Good Place, is par for the course as one of my favorite shows in the past year or two. It completely fills the hole that Parks and Rec left. It's beautiful and amazing and surprising in such like really crazy ways. It's great, and it focuses a lot on philosophy, and I love philosophy, so it's great.
You should all watch up on The Good Place by next Friday, the 30th of November. That's when that episode's going to be airing. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Geeking Program, or both. Well, I don't know why it's an or, it could be and. Any engagement, such as sharing a post, tagging us, or tweeting #CGP, will enter you into a raffle where you, yes you, lucky listener who's driving to work right now maybe, you get to pick the topic for a future episode.
Oh, the last winner was Jonas.
Really?
Hassan, yeah.
Oh shit! Joe Nasty.
He was announced, I guess, technically several weeks ago, but in actuality yesterday.
Yeah. Reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is a critical help to growing our show, and we'll read new reviews on the air. Anyway, thank y'all for listening, subscribing, sharing, everything. We'll get back to you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of the Common Geeking Program was hosted by Pat Brem, joined by Representatives Keenan Kodesh and Ryan Mossbarger. This episode is sponsored by Having Opinions. Like, dude, I have so many opinions about this. Just about Banksy, and just the bullshit of the art world, and the myth of the auteur that we can't live without, and you know what, I'm not gonna get into it. I just wish I was on this episode. The podcast is created and produced by Colin Ketchen and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me, Taeemul Chowdhury, and original music by Colin Ketchen. Next week, we'll be talking about The Good Place, so be sure to read up on that, and thank you for listening to this podcast. Ciao!
Cool. We gotta find the fucking script-a-dip